I mean, she's lecturing a guy who got shot about being in danger.
It is a truth long established that a liberal woman over 50 with a lesbian haircut is sure to support
about behaviors. And she's cloaking these behaviors under the false guise of compassion.
The most evil ideas and policies that mankind has ever conceived. If evil had a face and a haircut.
Imagine a religious leader, a bishop, no less, standing at a podium, draped in the robes of faith, speaking passionately about compassion, justice, and equality. She claims to fight for the most vulnerable. She presents herself as a champion of immigrants, LGBTQ rights, and social justice. She preaches love, acceptance, and understanding. But what if I told you that behind the carefully crafted sermons and the media praise, there was something far more sinister happening? What if I told you that this same bishop had secretly funneled millions of taxpayer dollars into radical woke projects, all while using her religious authority to silence critics? And what if I told you that you were the one paying for it? This is the story of Maryann Budde, the so-called woke bishop.
This is what it would look like. It would look exactly like Maryann Budde.
So she uses her spiritual authority to block criticism because she's a bishop. Don't argue with a bishop.
And the $53 million funding scandal that's shaking the political world. Because the deeper you dig, the uglier it gets. You may remember Maryann Budde from one of the most bizarre political moments in recent history. It was 2020 and America was on fire, literally. Riots erupted across the country following the death of George Floyd, fueled by calls for racial justice and revenge. Washington, D.C. was no exception. BLM activists and Antifa rioters tore through the city, smashing windows, burning businesses, and clashing with police. And then they set fire to St. John's Episcopal Church, a historic church just a block from the White House. For most people, this would be a wake-up call, a moment to condemn the destruction, a moment to call for peace. But not Maryann Budde. Instead, she blamed Donald Trump. As soon as the fire was put out, Budde rushed to the media, not to condemn the rioters who had attacked her own church, but to attack Trump for showing up to see the damage. She went on PBS, shaking with rage, claiming that Trump had used her church as a political prop. Let that sink in. A violent mob set fire to a house of worship. And the bishop of that church was...
She's a bishop. And it comes from a long history of this. She's not defending sinners or the poor. She's not like... She's talking about behaviors. And she's cloaking these behaviors under the false guise of...
For those rights to be maintained, which means we have to be vigilant, and it's just the nature of it.
$8 million through her organization by USAID. That's right, your federal taxpayer dollars was being...
more upset about Trump standing in front of it than she was about the people who tried to burn it down. But that was just the beginning, because behind the scenes, Budde wasn't just pushing a radical agenda, she was getting paid for it. For years, Budde presented herself as a selfless leader fighting for justice. But in reality, her organizations were receiving massive sums of money from USAID, a taxpayer-funded government agency. How much? At least $53 million. That's right, your tax dollars were quietly being funneled into a so-called church that prioritized political activism over faith. But where did the money actually go? It didn't go toward helping struggling families. It didn't go toward rebuilding communities. It didn't even go toward traditional religious work. Instead, it was funneled into radical leftist causes, trans activism, open borders policies, and woke education programs designed to indoctrinate, not uplift. And the deeper the investigation went, the clearer the pattern became. Because Budde wasn't alone. Here's where things take an even darker turn. Investigators discovered that Budde's organization wasn't the only one receiving millions in government grants. In fact, hundreds of millions of dollars have been funneled into woke churches across the country. But there was a catch. These churches had changed their names in government databases to avoid detection. Why? Because they weren't operating as actual religious institutions. They weren't focused on faith, charity, or community service. They were political organizations disguised as places of worship, pushing abortion, gender ideology, and socialist policies, all while still collecting millions in taxpayer money. And Budde? She wasn't just a part of it. She was one of the key players. One of the most disturbing aspects of this scandal isn't just the money. It's the way Budde used her position as a religious leader to block criticism. Whenever someone questioned her motives, she played the bishop card. Oh, you're attacking me? But I'm a woman of faith. How dare you criticize a religious leader? But Budde wasn't using her platform to preach faith. She was using it to push radical politics. And when people pointed out the corruption, she labeled them as bigots, extremists, and conspiracy theorists. Because in her world,
election like a month or two before, after they mentioned the president's name, and it was like they got shot with a dart in the jugular.
About behaviors. And she's cloaking these behaviors under the false guise of compassion.
That contained like methamphetamine and rabies, okay? And they're like, wow! And I'm like, what is wrong? Guys.
I mean, she's lecturing a guy who got shot about being in danger.
Truth was the enemy. But as the saying goes, the truth always comes out. By now, you may be wondering, why do people fall for this? Why do so many woke activists follow people like Budde without question? The answer is simple: Trump derangement syndrome. People like Budde don't have real arguments. They just hate Trump. They don't need facts. They don't need logic. They just know one thing: if Trump is involved, they're against it. This isn't politics anymore. It's a cult. And the worst part? They'll drag the entire country down with them just to make sure Trump doesn't succeed. Now that this scandal has been exposed, the real question is, will anything be done about it? Will the government finally cut off funding to these woke churches? Will the media cover this massive scandal, or will they bury it like everything else? Will Budde face consequences, or will she just move on to the next grift? One thing is clear: the American people are waking up. No one wants their hard-earned tax dollars going to radical activists disguised as religious leaders. And now that the truth is out, it's up to us to make sure this corruption ends. So now, we turn the question over to you. How do you feel about your tax dollars being used to fund woke churches? Should the government be allowed to finance political activism disguised as religion? Or is it time to put an end to this insanity once and for all? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let your voice be heard. And if you believe this corruption needs to be stopped, hit like and subscribe. Because the truth needs to be exposed. And we're just getting started.